anything along those lines. So just to kind of give a little bit of an introduction to Wayne using his book, Wayne Holloway-Smith's debut collection, Alarum, was shortlisted for the Seamus Heaney Centre for Poetry Prize, the Michael Murphy Memorial Prize and the Roehampton Poetry Prize, as well as being a Poetry Book Society wildcard choice. His poem, which you may have read in this very collection, The Posh Mums Boxing in the Square, won first prize in the Poetry Society's 2018 National Poetry Competition. Wayne also has a new book, which is just about to come out, called Lobsters, published by Makina Press, which hopefully we might hear something of, or indeed the entirety of tonight, which is exciting. So yeah, Wayne, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. We're really ready to kick us off with reading.
Thanks everyone. It's really nice to be in a room with some people. I've sort of forgotten like the volume you're supposed to speak at and that, because like I haven't read from this book at all to anyone in a room yet, so it's really nice to do that. Of course, it was on the when it was on the shortlisted for that T.S. Eliot Prize thing. Normally, there's a big reading, but because of COVID, it was online. In fact, it was pre-recorded, and what I didn't know is you could literally fast forward to the end and find out who won. So like my friend texted me like, you didn't win. And I was like, at least let me, you know, find that out organically or whatever. But yeah, so I already knew that I didn't, you know, get the 25,000 bags, which was a bit disappointing, but it was kind of, I guess, inevitable. So am I talking at like an okay volume here? Yeah, cool. So yeah, I don't really know. This is like some of them have read it?
Yeah, all of our MA students who are here will have read it.
So you'll know that it kind of doesn't have any titles and it's kind of one long fragmentary piece. So there's no like natural point like at which to stop and do like a little anecdote. You know, like how normally when you see poets, they do a poem and then they like stop and tell a little funny thing about what their next poem, where it came from. But I don't really know how to do that because like there's no like natural place to stop. And I really bombed hard at Cheltenham Literary Festival, like, because I just said to my friends that fuck, I'm out to speak. Yeah. I said to my friends, like, fuck it, I'm just gonna read straight. And then so I did, and everyone else did these little anecdotes. And then at the end of the thing, there's like this queue for like signing books, and mine was like, literally half the size of everyone else. And they were like, that's because you didn't do any talking books. And also like this wasn't out yet, so I kind of like read from A4 sheets of paper, which I think also looks kind of boring. So the only time I've sort of read from this is in a whisper today on the train on the way here, just to see how it sounded to myself. But then I became very self-conscious that my face is on the back cover. And there were like a couple of people sort of staring and being like, what a self-indulgent prick. He's out here reading his own book. So I'm going to just read for a little bit and then I might just stop or something. And so there's a couple of bits that maybe, so maybe like it'd be helpful to know that there was, I did like an internship at Bloomsbury Publishing House when I was like ages and ages ago, like maybe 10 years ago, more. And my first job was to proofread Patti Smith's Just Kids. And there was an anecdote in there that she told, which I kind of lean on in one of the poems. And another thing I'm definitely going to mention is like I went to hypnotherapy to try and stop smoking. And there's another bit where I kind of took a bit of a story from like a disreputable or several disreputable sites on the internet, and I kind of like appropriated that as well. and then I'll just stop and talk for a little bit so that I can, my voice is very boring, I understand that. So maybe everyone needs a little bit of variation. Maybe you could sing, Rebecca, at the right time. Like, I'm just gonna start with a bit. There's so like the first thing that I had to grapple with, I guess, coming of age, is like my dad. Like, he was a horrible dickhead. But also, like, I saw loads of pictures of him, like when he was like my age, or like maybe even younger, and it was like way hotter than me. Like, ludicrous. My girlfriend, we went to my mum's house for the first time recently. Obviously, I'd been there before, but she'd never been there. And we were looking through these photo albums, and the first one she came to of my dad, she made a noise I'd never heard her make before. And I was like, oh God, here we go. So I'm starting from the bit that talks about one of the photos of my dad, and then I'll just read for a bit and then stop. And then a little bit later, I was hoping maybe I could read this, which is it's like it's kind of like one long poem again, but maybe not as fragmentary or something. We'll see how we go. If your eyes are starting to glaze over, that maybe we can, I don't know, do something else. Talk about old episodes of EastEnders or Only Fools and Horses or something. Oh yeah, now I'm gonna have to, I was hoping not to do this, but so ages ago I had to wear glasses, and well, no, I still have to wear glasses, but like, I just thought I never had to wear glasses, so I probably should own it. Like, so I just got the biggest, most ridiculous glasses I could find, and now I actually regret that. So like, I was hoping that maybe I could get away with not wearing them, but I've just looked at the page and I literally can't see anything. So, but the other thing is these have become, I don't know when my head has shrunk, but they're too big for me now. So if they fall off, it'll be embarrassing. But if we can all just pretend it didn't happen, and I'll just sort of carry on. I don't have, you know, like those things that it's like a cloth that you wipe them with.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know where mine is, so this is just full of dust. So I don't know whether like I'll be able to see better or not, or maybe it'll be worse. Sorry about these, by the way. sorry. I love a cloth. Cheers. Oh, that's yeah. Thanks so much. I never get treated like this anywhere else. I did a reading at Liverpool, John Moore's, and there's like 100 students there, and like, everyone's got their books and etc. And we do a sign-in thing afterwards. It's really lovely. Felt like Beyonce or something. And then they like paid for me to stay in the hotel and like all of that stuff. And then I went back to the University of Hertfordshire where I teach. And it was week 7 of a second year poetry module. And I was giving them this like kind of exercise, and this girl didn't really know what I was talking about. So I tried to describe it, and I was like, so you do this, and then you can kind of make that mean anything. So like this would stand in for that annoying guy, Holloway-Smith, that's making me do this exercise. And she looked me dead in the eyes, bearing in mind that I'd just read to 100 students in another university. She looked me dead in the eye and said, who's Holloway-Smith? I'm not saying read my, you know, collective works or anything. I'm just saying look at the module file.
Wow.
So I'm just going to do this last little bit of work. Okay. We've had a good time so far.
We've had a great time.
If I ruin it now,
actually.
yeah. Thanks everyone for coming. Any questions about my vastly dwindling popularity at the University of No? Okay, right, I'll just read this. Excuse me. I don't have COVID, by the way. Keep the photo of my dad smoking and looking like James D. I've been so lovingly breathed into by the empty promise of that cigarette, that kiss-curled head in that black and white photo. He's my age or younger, he's maybe 15. In that photo, back knuckled to his own dad's barn door. He is slender in too tight jeans. He is going to do something shallow, soon and very bad. I'm trying hard to follow his example, but I don't want to die. I can't seem to lift a heavy thing or get into fights past the lighter. I just like smoking and watching TV, silent like his photo. In his eulogy, they said he loved beef, always beef in his sandwiches, his hair is receding. He is being very attractive in his photo. He's going to do something very soon. He is gone. It's already done. Here's your mother. She is sleeping, dressed in ostentatious pink, in the passenger seat of a brown beige Vauxhall Cavalier, her hair done, perfect, curated, the windows done, uptight, the exhaust fumes of your father gently filling up the car. I want you to leave your body now, he tells me. His voice, not so much hypnotic, as reaching for the hypnotic. But I leave it anyway, sitting in the upright chair of the windowless room, for a place higher up that's not quite the windowless room, though I'm aware of my body's particular kind of breathing down there, dressed in my favourite shirt. And somehow up here, I'm dressed in that same shirt, which is, I feel, suddenly becoming very important. Its colour pertaining to a quiet hue of knowing I can't quite explain. And I do not think about the money I have given him, the man who was speaking, but I'm looking instead down on a yellow kitchen in Swindon, on a tiny remembered body I have found crying or about to cry in little white shorts. And there is carpet streaked with blue, and there is the noise of a terrible thing that is happening, and there is summer outside with its other children. He doesn't understand, does he? Says the man. He's so young. And I understand the shirt that he will have to grow through all of the terrible things to fit. I can feel my body now filling up the space inside its soft and lavender scented cotton. Here's your mother. She's Patti Smith and gazes hungry in November in 1969 in Manhattan in the Horn and Harder automat upon a sandwich in a vending machine behind its glass with one dime less in her hand than she needs. Just then, your dad appears dressed as Allen Ginsberg, buys her the sandwich, and now she has to sit and listen to him talk about Walt Whitman for the rest of her life. But instead of talking about Walt Whitman, he is silent. Suddenly, they are both rotated 90 degrees to the left, and instead of an automat, there are only armchairs, a carpeted living room, a TV. There's a little quote here from like an essay on, I can't remember, Kafka, Freud, one of them. In the dream, his father was alive once more and was talking to him in the usual way. But the remarkable thing was that he was nevertheless dead, only he didn't know it. One story goes, a man on his lunch break was hit by a falling baby falling from a very high window of a building the man was passing on his lunch break. The man saved the baby's life, accidentally getting landed on. The man saved that exact baby's life, accidentally getting landed on one exact year later, on his lunch break, breaking the slightly more grown baby falling from the same window's fall, accidentally. The man's name is Joseph Figlock. What is sad is the realization this baby could literally mean anything but doesn't. It does not. What I don't know is whether that baby, a toddler by now, has fallen a third time, whether he's falling still and at this moment crying out, where is Joseph Figlock? I can't see him. Why isn't he here? Elsewhere, a man is cutting down a tree. He works at it day and night, his big heaving chest growing tired, soaring at that thick trunk. After a long while, the tree is still standing, though at a tilt towards his house where his family sit. There's a pie in the oven. There are toys and the laughter of children. It's a beautiful home, but he's come this far and it's taken so much effort. I'm just going to read one more bit, if that's all right. Oh yeah, the second bit of the quote that I read earlier. The he could refer to either the father or the son. In other words, the son could be dead and not know it. When he's dancing in a red field at night time, he's not dancing in a red field at night time, but standing there thinks, I'm now the sort of person who dances in a red field at night time. That's me. Well, everybody else is just dancing. Truth be told, I've never danced in anything at night time, or cried much, or hugged my mother, or swam in lakes in the middle of woodlands on the outskirts of Berlin in a place called Lanka with my daughter and my girlfriend. I dip my toes in, that's all, and think I'm now the sort of person who swims in lakes in the middle of woodlands on the outskirts of Berlin in a place called Lanka, and who knows he doesn't really, and has things very wrong with him. Astronomical, unfair things that preclude me, like death somewhere tucked under the armpit, the thought of it, and a tangerine ache somewhere in my wrist that feels disgusting and I could be dead soon or someone else could. A scratching so far into my chest there's no more skin. My girlfriend's watching me be all these things beside our picnic, and my daughter smiling, my feet wet, there are all these thoughts. The soul is what grows on things when they last, said a man who didn't have any problems. Dear anything, let me last across this moment and on just a bit more. My body is busy thinking itself unwell. My body is thinking itself outside of this moment. What if the soul this moment is cultivating is just an unwell thought I'm piling on top of all the other very disturbing thoughts until they stand up inside me? Someone I love dying from me thinking or not thinking about the very specific circumstances of it. Fear of very specific types of bacteria and cancer of the mouth, lung, the brain, very specifically hemorrhaging all the harm I could do. What I do is I take these and I keep them safe inside me. I have to organize them, have to keep them very tidy, each little shit thing. What I have to do is count through each one. What if my body fell away and this soul I'm building was just a thing left sweating alone in the finicky sun? I'm laughing my whole self into my sad sleeve, and what this has so quickly become, but wait, I can come back from this. Everybody loves a comeback, so I'm calling myself backwards into the lake. It can happen. Green shadows are all over the place at once. Here goes. The sun is suggesting I get over myself, and my daughter is laughing. I look silly doing it. Here goes. The water is very calm. Everyone is dancing. The rhythm is in me. Thanks for that's the. I'm not going to read any more from that book now. Is that all right? Do you want to talk a bit first to break it up?
Up to you. What do you want to do?
I mean, like, I'm happy to talk to you.
Yeah, we can talk a bit.
Because then I'll read the other things.
Yeah.
We've got time. And I can take these glasses off.
Have a little break.
Horrific.
Glasses.
Mm.
They look good though.
I don't know anymore, man. I used to think, I was going for that, like, you know, woman in her 70s kind of look.
Artifactful.
Right, you know what?
Oh yeah.
So, but now I feel like, I don't know, it outgrew me.
No, I don't think you can outgrow her. She's an icon.
She's an icon, but I
Now
can't
you
really
are too. Okay, enough chit chat. Right. We'll do a little bit of questions and then yeah, we can go back to the work, which frankly, yeah, is very mesmerizing. So I feel like I've completely just gone into the poetry zone.
We just say, like, you know, like when I show students poems, right? Like lots of you lot will probably want to write prose, isn't it, as well, right? So you're like prose writers that you have to do poetry as well, right? You'll read a novel or like 2 short stories. That's cool. Right, but if a poem goes over 1 page, you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, sometimes I feel that.
It's true. You're gonna really hate this next one. It's like, good lord,
I mean,
it's long.
I can't really say anything against it. Every book I write is basically 1 long poem. So yeah, we're on a similar track. But yeah,
and we have similar haircut. So.
Wayne was suggesting that we could be like a new version of the White Stripes.
Are they brother and sister? Are they married, cousins? You know,
we're not going to tell you.
No one can find out.
Okay, so yeah, so basically I've kind of broken my questions down into different sections, and this is my intro bit.
Yeah.
And I wanted to begin with some kind of slightly unexciting questions, but I think questions which potentially could be quite useful to some of the people that are here and who are listening, because obviously we have creative writing students here, we have budding writers, and I definitely know that we have that online as well. So I guess I just wanted to kind of ask you, because I mean, I don't know if anyone else finds this interesting, but I find it really fascinating. It's the kind of thing you don't always ask writers that you know, because somehow it just never comes up. But I wanted to ask, what drew you to poetry as a reader? Like, who were the first poets that meant something to you? How did you get into reading them? Like, because obviously before you become a writer of poetry, you usually become a reader of it. So how did that start for you? Do you know? Can you even remember?
Yeah, but it's really embarrassing.
Great, perfect, good.
Well,
I'll add some drama.
So basically, like, I grew up in a house. I didn't have any books in it. So like, I mean, yeah, I didn't really read a book. Like I mean, I didn't even read the ones that they made you read at school.
Yeah.
Until I ended up kind of like, I mean, for better or worse, like living, when I moved to London, I lived with a bunch of little class boys, and they all just, you know, I'd come back from some club a little bit drunk, and they'd just been sat around talking about a book, and I sort of felt a little bit left out. So then I'd like rapidly read the books that they were talking about. And now they're not like that exciting, you know, like 1984 or something. So I understand that they were hugely cliche. So anyway, I just kind of got into reading a bit from that, but like ultimately, like all of my friends ended up being like artists. When you move to London, like everyone's like an artist or in a band or something, right? And I can't play any music and I can't really draw. And the thing is, I always felt like they get to dress really cool because they're like artists or like in bands or whatever. And I just wanted to wear a hat. But I was like, I can't wear a hat. I'm like, I work in an office. So what can I do? And I was like, well, maybe I'll just be a poet. Like, there aren't any poets anymore, are there? Like, maybe I'll just be like the best poet in the country. Which won't be hard because they're all dead, aren't they? So, like, I mean, like, so like maybe like the lead singer of the Libertines or something. Like, people thought that he was I'm like, that guy's rubbish. I could probably write better than that. So then I kind of like was just doing that. And then, so in terms of you saying you have to be a reader before you're a writer, I literally read anything. Like, I just thought, why would I read? Like, people should be reading me. and so yeah. I kind of like, after a while, like my friends who went to Oxford and did English, it seemed important at the time, right? Because like, you're like this guy, I'm from Swindon, like relatively uneducated, and I'm like, my God, this guy to Oxford. And she was like, you're quite good at this, so maybe you should take it seriously. And she sort of just booked me on like an evening course with Roddy Lumsden, who was known. And he was just really, really patient with me. Like I was taking in effectively like quite shit versions of Bob Dylan songs, like thinking like, oh my God, wait till he gets a load of this. Like within a month, like book deal, probably some kind of prize. But well, they were all just lots of really good writers in there, and they were like, they were really patient, and that was how I got into it. But actually, I think at the time there weren't any interest. I didn't find any of the UK poetry very interesting at all. I knew I wanted to read and write poems, but like I just thought this stuff I'm not really interested in. But there was loads of stuff in America that I was really interested in. There's lots of the American stuff, kind of. That, you know, I mean, might not know the names, but there's a guy called D.A. Powell that I was like well into, and like Matea Harvey was doing this really inventive, weird stuff that I had never seen before. And then a woman called Brenda Shaughnessy, like her first two books, like even the titles were like banging, like Human Dark with Sugar and Interior with Southern Joy. Like I was like, holy shit, like this is. You're allowed to do this. And then there started becoming people in the UK like that I'm friends with now, but at the time I was just, holy shit, like these people are doing the thing. I didn't even know you were allowed to do that stuff. Like, because that wasn't what was modelled in the UK. So like, yeah, like mainly, and then like meeting people like you and like Jack Underwood, Rachel Allen, Kaio, Anthony Nexiguru, those lot, like. And I started to think, oh shit, there's an actual community here, and we kind of end up encouraging each other. And I remember when we went out for a drink when I started writing this, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. this is going to be terrible. And you were like, I think it's going to be terrible. And then we started talking. Yeah, well, hopefully. But yeah, you kind of just meet your people, don't you? And they kind of encourage. Anyway, I've got
No, it is really interesting though. And in a way, I'm kind of glad you said that, because actually it's not true they always read a rewriter. That's not always the way at all. Definitely, I have students all the time who want to write poetry, but they haven't actually necessarily read it, but they just feel the appeal of that form, and that's through the writing that they actually get to the reading. So yeah, there's so many ways. I mean, as a follow-up question, because that's a really like strong picture of like how you kind of got there and how you started writing and sort of being part of that poetry community. But what about the jump from that, like kind of finding your people, starting writing, enjoying it, to actually getting your first book published? So Wayne's first book was Alarum with Bloodaxe. What was the process of that kind of like coming into being, if you can remember?
Well, there's a few like kind of leaps, but basically, like after I got a couple of poems published in like little places, like someone just said, I was working in like a homeless centre, and it was kind of killing me because like, I mean, nearly, like I had like a standing knife put to my throat, punched in the face. It became very demoralising after a while. Like, I found like guy dead. It was rough, and someone just said to me, "Why don't you just go to uni and do like a creative writing?" And I didn't think I was allowed because I failed all my GCSEs and didn't have any A-levels. But then turns out, as a mature student, you're just allowed to go to university. Like, and it helps if you've had a couple of things published. So I kind of did that, and weirdly, like eventually sort of ended up doing a PhD. And during that PhD, I researched into, it's sick. If you can do a PhD and literally get paid to do a PhD, you're literally getting paid to like read the stuff that you like want to read or you would have read anyway, but you've also just got someone a bit cleverer than you can talk to about it. And I sort of did that, and then so that was the reading that ended up producing Alarum. And then like Bloodaxe have like a few of their like older poets kind of keep an eye out and suggest newer poets to the editor, Neil Astley. So one of them just suggested me, and he asked for 10 poems. So I sent him 10 poems, and then within 2 weeks, he was like, yeah, let me see the whole manuscript. Then I sent him like a manuscript, which wasn't actually, it turns out, anything like the final book. But and then I waited for, I don't know, a long time, like way longer than 2 weeks, like maybe like 9 months, to the point where I was like, I don't know, like maybe it's not going to happen. And then and then it did, and then he was like, well, so you got like another 1.5 years to get this thing to me or whatever. And then I kind of changed everything and sent it back, and he was really great. Initially he was like, hold on, this isn't anything like the book that you signed a contract for, Sunshine. And I was like, yeah, so it's better though, isn't it? And he was like, so kind of let me away with it. But that's how I had a pamphlet before that, but like maybe not, maybe it's well different from the thing that I ended up writing. Like I was trying to prove something in that pamphlet, like if you're from like a background like mine, then you sort of try and overcompensate by like using loads of polysyllabic words and being very flamboyant with language and stuff. And then I realized that was just, I was like trying to be something that I wasn't.
That's really interesting. I'm just going to check the time, honestly.
Oh yeah.
So I don't overwatch. Okay. Okay, I'm going to ask a few more questions, then we can have some stuff. But it seems like a good point. You have obviously just read something from Love Minus Love. And when I was rereading a book to do this Q&A, there were just so many different things that I kind of wanted to ask. But something that really struck me rereading it was the form, basically, and the fact that obviously, any of you that have read it, it's got this really experimental kind of innovative diction. And for me, I mean, I've no idea if you were kind of thinking about it in these terms, but for me as a reader, it's almost like it allows certain subjects which are really difficult, both emotionally difficult, but also like actually difficult to describe and put into words. It kind of allows them to be discussed. So like an example for me is, there's an erasure poem on page 21, if you have the book.
I'll just check what that
just check your poem that you've written, yeah. And it engages with the narrator's mother's version of the narrator. So like that in theory, the narrator's family can't have been that bad because he's achieved a lot. Yeah. But the narrator kind of feels like, well, he's achieved that despite the fact that, his family's been quite difficult. And for me, it was like, that's such a difficult thing, as I say, not just in an emotional sense, but it's very difficult to actually put that across in a poem. And I think the form that you've used makes that so kind of like understandable and relatable and powerful. And basically, I was just interested to hear you talk more about the form of the book, not just that poem necessarily, but the whole book, as a way of engaging with these themes which are in there. And there's so many different themes: family, relationships, masculinity, trauma, mental health. Like, did form follow content? Like, did you have a sense of, I know what I want to talk about in this book and I need to create a form for it? Or did you just kind of write and the form developed from what you wanted to say?
I think, like, so the first thing to say is, like, those bits that you're talking about there, they like, if you see the notes in the back of the book, that's how who actually wrote those. So like Bell Hooks wrote that. But the thing is that you often see people like talk about their influences or like put a little epigraph after, you know, like these people have already basically said it, and like they had such an impact on my thinking, like maybe I could include them and be like part of the conversation. I think also with exclusively with the Bell Hooks one or some of those other things, making it slightly my own, like, or engaging with it, but basically using someone else's vocabulary allowed me to talk about that type of shit that you were talking about at like a remove. Yeah. So if my mum was like, hey, hold on a second, I'd be like, hey, I didn't say that, that was Bell Hooks. Do you know what I mean? Like, that was Bell Hooks that said that thing. I'm just quoting. Like, it felt like I was allowed to do that a little bit. But like, on the whole, I wrote this entire book on my phone. So in notes, like, and lots and lots of it. I think the thing is that I just like, you know, like how sometimes, like, you're in this room now and sort of listening to me speak, but there's like a memory or an experience that you've had that seems like a bit more real and present than this moment right now. Like, that's kind of like how I think about it. So like, I wanted there not to be any titles, and I wanted everything to seem like it was happening all at once, because there are lots and lots of experiences that are of equal importance or whatever, and I didn't want to write anything in like a linear fashion, or I didn't want there to be any narrative. And I think that I kind of got to that stage. I did like a little experiment before that where it was just like a box of poems. So a lot of these came from that, like they were printed on single sides of cards, and like they weren't bound, so like the reader could sort of shuffle them and write and read them in any order, and it was kind of like a collaborative act with the reader. So I was trying to work out how maybe to do that in a full collection. And is that good enough answer? Yeah. I sort of don't really know. I find that I'm not really very good at explaining how I do things.
I think you explained it pretty well.
It's more of an intuitive thing, isn't it? Like, I don't like have a plan or something.
I think that's what's interesting in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like, just to hear like form and content kind of coming out at the same time. Also, I have no idea you wrote it on your phone. That's really interesting as well.
So you get it on your notes, right?
Yeah.
And then like, and sometimes your phone does that autocorrect. And you're like, actually, that's better. So I'm going to keep that. And the whole thing felt to me like kind of contingent. Like a lot of our identity feels well, it is contingent upon where we're born, what family we're born into, the government we control at the time, who you meet, whether like your dad or your nan like has a car accident, like what you eat for dinner. Do you know what I mean? All the last thing you heard on the radio, all of these things are kind of, they're the things that kind of shape who you are. And it's not just like I don't think you're just born with like this one true self, or, you know, like the Mormons, there's a Mormon church like at the end of my road, and I think that's definitely what they sort of indicate. I've gotten to the stage where I'm like quite rude to them now. So like the other day, this guy came out, there's two of them, always two, isn't it? And he's like, hey man, can I ask you a question? They're all American. And I was like, yeah, go on. And he was like, what makes you happy? And I was like, people that don't try and speak to me because they've got an agenda. And then I was walking my dog, and he was like, I love your dogs. You don't even know me. I just think that, anyway, I don't know why.
No,
I'm
no,
basically
no,
just
no.
trying to prove to you guys that I'm very funny. Yeah. Shall I read from this?
Yeah,
one?
I think it's time. Let's have
This
some
is
more
called
fun.
Lobsters, and like, I've got like actually maybe another one, but so you can like pass that around, and then you like, so people can just see what it sort of looks like as I'm reading it a little bit, so you don't think I do actually have a mental illness, but I don't want you guys to think that I'm mental. Do you know what I mean? In the way that I'm reading this, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to read the whole thing, right? But it looks like it's got a lot of pages, but sometimes there's literally like one line on a page. So like, you know, don't get too worried. And you know, if you need to check your Instagram or whatever while I'm reading, that's fine too. And also, the other thing is just to say, like, there's this woman called Catherine Killalay who wrote this incredible poem, and when she read that, it's kind of like quite a gnarly piece of work, and it was quite way ahead of its time. But when she introduced it, it's called Henniker's Ditch, and she said, "There's no work to be done. Like as a reader, as a listener, there's no work. It's not a puzzle. You don't have to work anything out. Like it's not like a code or like a GCSE text that you have to write. There's no right answers. So it's almost just like an experience. And I think like if I could say the same thing about this, that might be the best way to hear it. Not that it's as good as Henniker's did, but she did blur it. So I don't know.
It might
like,
be the new.
it may or may not be. I'm not saying that.
You can
Rebecca
decide.
says that. Okay, this is Lobsters, and I wrote all of it in one go. And it was kind of like lots of different things going on at the time, like getting broken up with, and that being in the first 2 weeks of lockdown, and like I don't know, loads of different shit going on. So I'm trying to make sense of it, really, like you always do. I think poetry, like if anything, it can kind of be, you can kind of find a vocabulary, or language is quite limited, isn't it? Like, so like all of us here have experienced tens of hundreds of different types of sadness, but we've got like one word to pin it to, like sad. And like if I said to Rebecca, like, I'm feeling sad, there's not really any way I could accurately articulate or for her to understand what particular type of sadness I've experienced. I think poetry can sometimes give you the means through which you can develop your own vocabulary. That's what I'm trying to do here. Some of you might think that fails, I don't know. Okay, Lobsters. Singing, and it's everything about my love. 3 sticks of lipstick I ate, 4 buttons I ate, the smoke from her red jacket, a custard pot so full of rage it torched my tiny childhood. A heart beating against the 4 pillars of the room, fresh from the microwave. We had discovered pain was dielectric and lumpy, tipped into the body from the outside. Oh Lord, did anyone ask for this type of touch? Cymbal crash, mandolin, my heart. My body is a group of southern musicians striking up a tune of longing. They don't know our acts as living things becoming objects. The radio is getting hammered now. I am singing myself into dead stuff. I ate the shadows. Now the shadows are retreating. Imagination is a malady. This is the last time I will write about your leaving. One life may hide another. Now she is gone, and here I am, like sellotape, trying to hold a river in place. A soft tuba, 3 perfect violins. I'm sorry we existed like this. You woke up and were suddenly healed. To talk about the original hunger was impossible. Your hair screwed tight, your scalp fixed to the bone, your mind banged down with all this love. We source our understanding of the world from our own bodies. Strings eking out a little more emotion at this point, a voice, 2 voices singing. How did we get down here among the potato peelings? We hold ceremonially our fingers when I love you suddenly rings false, when I'm full of doubts, hides, I'm certain about something. One of us said, I am made of hotness. One of us said, and this is heartbreaking. An antibacterial wipe in the dog bowl. I ate her hairspray. I ate all of the emotional music. I ate Monster Munch right along the way to my 30s. And we arrived knowing the whole world is happening beneath us. We're just not allowed to have much of it. It's so full on. Soup in the pot, broccoli, hot, clever water. I wanted to place a good moment on my tongue, hold several beads closer to my skin again. I wanted to tell you something beautiful, so I did, making an anchor of me. To be a person, I must outgrow my own shrinking. I ate my own trainers. I ate piano music, then a lovely little silence into which you emerge like spilling water. Mouthed my sad and slow rocking song, the bottom of everything. I wanted only to be useful, to shout out the window at night time, is everyone okay? And for the world to shout back. Out the window at night time, a scurry of gerbils, a street party. Inside the window, a creeping history of the blood. Outside, foxes biting the nighttime rotten. Inside, you are gone, walking from one room to another. Out the window, I literally shouted your name. Is everything okay? Silence. I ate the silence. Then a slow double bass starting up. One of us said, eventually we have to pay the mind back. And sticking bits of my damp hair on with spoonfuls of honey, I received word the Debenhams in Swindon had closed. The chip shop in Swindon had closed. The libraries in Swindon on fire. My childhood was shutting off its lights. 3 dull drum beats. It feels as if I'm about to be born but can't. Alone into the present tense. If there is a God out there, oh wafers of Christ, I am listening. At the bottom of everything is our drunk parents. At the bottom of everything, a piece of stained furniture. At the bottom of everything, behold, he comes riding on a cloud, his muscular temper, a noise under the lights of the kitchen. At the bottom of everything is onions. At the back of my throat, even then, singing, look, I love you. I said, I just need a use for this body and its music, a destination for people to arrive at, putting on a clean smelling shirt, stepping each leg through cotton trousers and walking out the door frame lit up and smashed to bits by the morning. Snow in your hair, snow in my eyes, and yeah, one of us said, here are some trees. At the bottom of everything is, we are grown up and escapees, fireworks in the beard of God. I ate a freckle, a tiny little piece of childhood, hallelujah. I have the exact same amount of mother I always had. One of us said, I got touched in the bath and it gave me an eating disorder. One of us said, the earth will swallow us up and it will give me an illness. I already have it. And we spoke about the dead so much, the house came down. A lit match, then the sound of several lit matches burning. The mornings of the last days were the freshest, most limpid. The apples are still being ignored. The crickets are screaming bloody Tuesday and the sky everywhere. You don't seem to be happy, one of us said. Oh yes, I am happy, but I am sad. The earth will swallow us, but not yet. I ate all the camera angles when they circled and it was just me in the middle of the road with a lolly stick. From the other side of the long city, your face appeared inside my pocket, an accordion sliding through my body. In one dream, everyone I've ever known, oh Lord, was holding my wrists and feet, sleeves and backside, so many hands on my body, thrown up, then caught, and again, my stomach through the air, my chemoreceptor was butterscotch in the blood, so much love stuffed with vanilla, salt, my inner ear was corn syrup, my throat filling with alkaline and treacle, thank you, I am soft cracked and laughing myself hoarse, thinking about it. Singing, look, I love you. The kindness in me is welling as if I were laying a hard-boiled egg. One of us said, eventually we have to pay the mind back. Continuous and slow good pain chopping up my fringe. Family, I had to step over drunk to leave. Look, I love you sliding from the sofa, grey carpet growing over my limbs while all of the shouting keeps going. I've locked their names behind my jaw. One of us said, let the dead bury their own dead, but what are we supposed to do with this massive shovel? I dug holes in the carpet we can sit down later and cry in. Remember how much fun it was watching our fathers bang their guns on the enameled sink? Not much. I'm so frantic to shrug off this inheritance, but why am I running these molars around my palm like a beaded necklace? I'm still carrying so much of this swinging, or walloping in the guts like a child hid inside a cutlery drawer. But okay, wow, your freckles. One voice, two voices singing. We kicked our feelings so far out in front of us. Every so often we found one and wrestled it backwards, chased it with a stick, pinned one to the carpet of our childhoods. It's true, we made several graves for the ones who were missing. When our mothers rang on Sundays, we put the phones in the ground next to the emptiness and grinned till we became finished. At the end of the ringtones, a kissing, vanishing along with its two constituent parts. You did something with your hands to something in my chest. Silence. Eventually, we have to pay the mind back. What do you do when you have no positive place to land on? When the only possibility of love in this present tense is a karate kick, one good handstand, collecting things as we go. I ate the way you smoked a cigarette. I've eaten several friendships like this until there is nothing. Solo, tears sliding down my isolated chin, a door clicked. Outside the window, our feelings on the monkey bars, our feelings on the playground, on swings, building sandcastles in the pit. Inside the window, my open shirt, the open fridge. Outside the window, the back of you. Please turn around. A dog is chasing an empty crisp packet. Inside the window, one toothbrush, a half-finished shoe rack. I'm sorry we existed like this. From a place beneath the earth, your phone, not mine, is ringing. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Wayne. That was amazing. I'm really glad that we could hear it on one time. I think it really works like that. Just like it.
It's the first time I read it out loud.
Thank you so much.
And I think I've like one. I like made one. But you know, like how like sometimes it's well intimidating when you go to a reading with people who've got your book and they reading along and they can see where you've like, but like none of you got that book, so I didn't really feel that intimidating. Yeah, it's not out till January, so there's nothing there. I'm cool, you know.
Yeah, thank you. That was really amazing. I definitely don't have time for all my questions, which is totally fine.
That was my plan. It's like Rebecca's cleverer than me, and I didn't want everyone to know that. You know, like when you go to somewhere, you're supposed to be the man, aren't you? I don't want to be like, you know, torn apart by.
Yeah,
by
don't
Rebecca.
say that because it's going to make my questions seem really banal. But
Yeah.
do you know what I
Who are
mean?
your three favourite poets?
Yeah, quickly like delete that one there. Oh god. Okay. So I'm going to ask maybe just one more kind of thematic type question, and then basically I'll ask you that what you just said. Yeah. So cool. Right. Okay. So there was again like reading it through, so many different like themes that I wanted to pick up on, and I kind of was a bit torn about what to pick. But I think one thing that really struck me is I feel like in our kind of cultural moment, you hear a lot of people talking about the sort of like complications of like masculinity. Yeah. So toxic masculinity, yes, but also just masculinity in general and kind of what it means, and different men kind of finding their way through maybe what that means to them. But I also don't feel that I've actually, I mean, maybe I'm just not reading enough, but I just haven't read that many works of literature that I feel like are engaging with that sort of particularly brilliantly. A few definitely are, but I thought this is a book that really does do that in a way that's really interesting. And there are just certain lines which I feel like really sort of capture, you know, something that again we hear about a lot, which is the fact that patriarchy and toxic masculinity is a burden for men as well as it is for women. But I think you summon that up so well. So like there's line, which actually you read this poem I can't seem to lift a heavy thing or get into fights, pass the lighter. I just like smoking and watching TV. And weirdly, I don't know if you've recently heard that Ed Sheeran got potentially cancelled for saying that when he was younger, he thought he might be gay because he really liked musicals and he was quite a gentle like boy and didn't like getting into fights, etc., etc. And whether we think he should get cancelled or not, I think the point that he was making was somehow to not fit into the typical sort of like shape of what it means to be a man. The only answer is, oh, it must be something to do with my sexuality. Yeah. Right, and obviously, you know, maybe it is, but it has to be that black and white. It has to be about who I am, sort of sexually. It can't be who I am just as a person. And of course, that also raises the fact that, of course, gay men like go across the spectrum of all different types of personalities. So there's all these kind of this confusion in those terms that I think you explore really well. And I'm just curious, like, whether you feel like poetry, because you were talking about how language made it frustrating. And it doesn't always do everything we want it to do. And I think that's never more true when we're thinking about, you know, whatever gender means, whatever it means to be a man or a woman. Do you think poetry is a good place for exploring those types of questions around those like sort of rigid boxes that they sort of society tries to put us in?
I think like maybe in my first book, maybe was I did that more because I was like off the back of my PhD. So I think that one of the things is that you're like lots and lots. You guys all right? Yeah. No, I get you. So I think that like the thing is you can be several different things. You don't have to be one thing. So there's like, you know, sometimes I like feel pissed off and angry or like do start a fight. I mean, not real. Like, I mean, it's not physique that's going to win, you know, fights or whatever. But like
agility,
yeah, I mean, obviously, and reach. 5'8", so no reach. And like, but you know, you can be that, and you can like watch a football game, and you can be a bit of a prick. Sometimes, you know, like that's the, like you. I'm probably misogynistic, like still, like you grew up in a misogynistic society. Like, there's not like I hate that idea of you're one thing or another, and like you're like unimpeachably. You have to own the fact that you're aspiring to something, but you're not always. I don't know. But I'm probably a dick, and also that sometimes I'm probably quite nice, and sometimes I'm quite effeminate, and sometimes like gentle and very self-critical. And I have a big thing, like I have like, and less so now, but an eating disorder, and like part of that is a rejection of trying to take up so much space. So like often reducing my size is like kind of a rejection of that stereotypical masculinity thing. Plus there's lots of different types of dominant masculinity, right? It ain't just the white van man, like, or the football hooligan or whatever, right? That, you know, like the kind of, I don't know, Alan Sillitoe characters, like Arthur, you know, like he'll have sex with your wife and then he'll beat the shit out of someone down the pub while he gets drunk, and you know, that's one type of dominant masculinity. But you've got another side. If you look at someone like Russell Brand, right? He's like, you know, I ain't like all of those people. I'm like this like verbose, fucking, you know, clever, articulate man that dresses effeminately, but he's still dominant and has dominated those environments. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then there's that kind of like James Bondy character that's like a man of impeccable taste. That's a different type of, you know, so there's all different types of like dominant masculinity, and we're only really thinking about one. But I think that you have to, yeah, like I think if you write 40 poems, you can be 40 different types of masculinity in that poem, and that's probably the most nuanced way that you can deal with it. So most of it for me is like I'm trying to like reject and move away from and critique and question what I am in relation to like my gender or whatever, but that's an ongoing thing. And sometimes you think you're doing all right, and then something will happen, and the way that you respond you're like, crikey, I didn't know, like, I've read Judith Butler. What am I still doing? Like, responding like this, do you know what I mean? It's kind of like that. I know that we've got to move on. But there was one more thing I wanted to say, it's really sweet. I've got a daughter, she's 11, and she wrote this poem the other day that was all about, she said, my dad, it's about me. She never writes about me, and she just rolls her eyes the whole time at any time I speak. It's really nice. She said, she said that sometimes my dad looks like he's wearing dresses, and he's got like his hair that he never combs, and my friends think he's weird, and he is, and he's skinny and like non-dominant, and he writes poems, but that was sort of the reason I was able to come out as gay. And I was like, oh man, that's it. I mean, I was really pleased with that, you know, and that's like, well, maybe I'm like edging my way towards something, or at least like in part modeling something to my daughter in a way. I still get mad though, do you know what I mean? Still got a bit of my dad in me or whatever. But yeah, anyway, I don't know, that's like the long-winded version of talking around the subject, because I think that on like social media and that, it's like a this or that, you're in this camp or you're in that camp, like you're right or you're wrong. And a lot of the time, I don't think it is just one or the other. Like we're all kind of complicit dickheads most of the time, you know what I mean? And online performance doesn't really solve anything, does it? Like it's how are you doing in real life? And I don't know, something like that. Totally. But I think probably the more interesting person that has spoken about this recently is Maggie Nelson on that, what's that new book? On freedom. Like I think she says it in a much more articulate way than I can.
That's really interesting. In relation to poetry as well, and like being able to.
Oh, I didn't mention poems at all.
You did. Because you said like playing out different versions of that.
Oh yeah.
But like that. But I felt that is exactly what you're doing. Like you're exploring it. You're not saying this is what a good way to be a man is. Let's destroy all these versions of being a man. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it'd be ridiculous if you did try and do that, but yeah. I guess poetry is quite a good space for that. It's the exact opposite of social media, maybe, in the sense that there's lots of space for language to kind of do what it can do, rather than have to be like reduced. Which, yeah, I just think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, but I'm gonna have to move on to another type of question.
Yeah,
no, we're good. But the kind of final thing that I just wanted to talk about is, as I'm sure you know, and as I'm sure all you guys know, this sort of poetry series, like the focus of it is poets from BAME backgrounds, working class poets, queer poets, and part of the reason that kind of that is the case is partly obviously because it's just really important to kind of foreground those voices, but it's also kind of specifically connected to the fact that poetry can have like a very sort of elitist ivory tower image, which I think is not necessarily like that's based on reality in many ways. If we look at like the past of UK poetry, similarly to you, like growing up, I didn't necessarily find UK poetry was massively speaking to me, not because I come from those backgrounds, but because it did seem a little bit staid and a little bit elitist and pale, stale and male and so on. And I guess what I was curious to ask you is, you know, you've been in poetry for like a fair while now, kind of. A veteran, yeah, a legend of the scene. And I guess what I kind of wanted to ask is whether you think there's been any positive change, like, especially in terms of kind of like working class poets being able to kind of have more space. Like, has anything shifted in terms of like a genuine sort of like diversity of voices, and what still needs to change? I mean, this is a massive question, but just things that kind of come to you like off the bat.
It's hard, like when you sometimes do these things, right? Like I'm in a room and it's just us, and so I can kind of say some stuff and like it's fine, but like I don't know where this is going after this, so I can't really say as much as I'd actually want to. But I do feel that sometimes perhaps some of the space still taken up to talk about some of these things are still being taken up by people that probably aren't working class or aren't from a specific background that is marginalized. But having said that, and the other thing I think when you talk about working class, I think one of the things that has shifted is when we think about working class literature, what we really think about is, and working class masculinity particularly, what we're thinking about really is white working class masculinity. So it's always a backward glance, like tinted with nostalgia at these like working class men, you know, like John Osborne or like Sillito or like even Tony Harrison or someone like that. And actually one of the things that is happening now, there are lots of voices from that are working class but aren't just white. And that's some of the biggest progression for me. And often I think that what needs to be questioned is because you see people like, you know, occupying spaces now, like Ray Antrobus, like you see him a lot, and you see Anthony and Exegoru a lot. And people assume then that because they're like these big timers now, that they're like these privileged middle class pricks or something, like not my language, but like, but that's not true at all. Like, and what I really am interested in questioning is, you know, like if you're working class but then you get a PhD, all of a sudden you ain't working class no more. And I'm wondering like why that is. Like, because a PhD is of value. And so as soon as a working class person gets something of value, they get absorbed into the middle class. What does that say about working class people? And it's the same with successful poets, I think, like Ray or Anthony, Rachel Allen, these type of people that are from working class backgrounds, but are assumed because of their success or their position within the poetry community or literary community at large, that they are not. And I think that's probably one of the interesting questions that I like to think about. And one of the things that I celebrate, you know, Caleb Femi coming through, like all good stuff, you know, all good, like people from different backgrounds, that, and they're kind of expanding the idea of what it is to be working class.
I think it's really true. Sorry, go on, what you saying.
No, I was going to say not what it is to be working class, because they are working class, but I mean like the kind of Guardian leadership assumes like a white working class, doesn't it? And people coming through from various communities, it's challenging. That's what I mean.
Yeah, it's challenging that like monolithic cliche image of what it is, rather than like the massively diverse and like confused reality, which is just like human beings. Absolutely. But I think it is really interesting, and it's just something I was interested to ask. That is something that comes up with students a lot, actually. Lack of like diverse working class representation. Like the representation's there, but it's often very one note in terms of what is allowed into the mainstream. Do you know what I mean? So I think that is really interesting. And I mean, this is a connected, but it's linked, but it's slightly different question. Because obviously we're here in York, and something, you know, obviously, I mean, you wouldn't know this, but like Wayne and I sort of came up in a similar sort of space in terms of poetry in London. We both like worked with similar people and stuff like that. That's obviously just one small part of like poetry scene that's in the whole of the UK. But like something that I do hear a lot from students, understandably, is how London-centric, you know, it, sort of writing, literature, poetry can kind of be. And it is obviously an issue, especially in terms of, you know, putting aside individual artists. Obviously a lot of publishing houses are based in London. A lot of fantastic ones are, Bloodaxe, you know, a northern publisher, for example. Clarkenet. I mean, there are actually loads, and in fact, you know, publishing, like poetry publishing in the north is actually very strong. But thinking of all the questions that I've just heard, a lot of times, it kind of, what advice would you have for a poet who's outside of London without maybe at that time like a clear connection to their own scene? Who wanted to get published, who wanted to share their work? Would you have any advice? I mean, you may be like, I'm not sure, but what would you say to them?
Well, first thing is, I think that there's more of a perceived London-centric thing than actually, than it like, if like, because someone said this online recently, and I was a bit like, hold on. So I went back through all of the people that have been shortlisted and won like the 2 major poetry prizes, and the people that have won it that were from London, there was like 2 in the last 15 years or something. And I was like, I don't, and also like, they're talking about like Irish poetry or whatever, but there are lots of Irish poets that are doing stuff. They just choose to go with London. Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, if you're that invested in like the progression of the Irish publishing industry, go with a fucking Irish publisher. Do you know what I mean? No one's making you go with one of the big ones. Like, so actually, it's kind of like a bit of an interesting and slightly selfish act to like do one thing, but then call it out on another. But I think that it depends. If you're just out there on your own, it's always going to be difficult. It's hard in London. Like if you don't know anyone in London, like that writes poems. Like, you don't automatically like get plugged into like
Definitely.
1,000 deep flipping poetry crew. Do you know what I mean? And in the same, but like if there's a community of you anywhere, like there's the poetry. There seems to be a bit of a buzz in Birmingham at the moment.
Yeah, for sure.
And that seems to be something that those guys have just done.
Mm.
And I feel like if you've got
Manchester
mates
as well.
that's super into it, like you might as well roll. And Edinburgh and Glasgow,
Yeah.
like I don't know. Yeah, it's difficult. Because
So just like find your scene,
find your people. I think
Mm.
there are people all over the shop, aren't they? Right? And it's easier now that social media exists. I guess.
Yeah, the internet in general.
Back in my day, so I had to. What are those? Pager. I had to
Did you
page
page
people.
people?
Yeah, like a drug dealer.
Just
And they
page
ring me
your
on a one of those public telephones.
How old are you? Well, don't answer
73.
that. So yeah, you're looking good for it. Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you. And I think, yeah, very, very good advice. But okay, I don't want to absorb any more time with my own review thoughts. I want to, get some questions from the audience. We'll just quickly check the time. So yeah.
7:08.
Okay, we are great. So yeah, questions.
I've got a dog at home that's like real fucked off at me, I think, by now. For I've left at like 12. He's locked in the house, driving all the neighbours crazy. I don't know. He might be dead.
We'll find out. We won't find out.
Oh,
I'll find
he's
out.
very old. He's an 84-year-old. Yeah, I just adopted him. So he's seeing out his retirement with me. But right now, what the fuck is this guy?
Yeah, it's like, why does he love poems so
Yeah.
much? What a loser. Okay, yeah, questions. If you just put your hand up, I will just point to you. We don't have any mics or anything like that because it's such a small space. So yes, over there.
Do you have any advice for writing about a place that might be like inherently working class, but like being like nasty about?
Oh my
Like in a
god.
way that's truthful, but people aren't going to be like, oh, you're just being like dark about it.
He's gone.
No, that's what's her name?
Okay.
Kate is like absolutely killing me out here. Because that is that's the trick, isn't it? And I think, because obviously you heard the word Swindon about 1,000 times. And like, it's difficult because like Swindon is an inherently terrible place. Like it is terrible. Like I'm talking about, like, I think it's got like per, I don't know, percentage per like population or however you measure that. Statistically, it's got the highest level of like paedophiles in the country.
Oh my God.
Like the highest level of sexual assaults. Do you know what I mean? Like it is not a very nice place. Like, so in one sense, I don't really feel that bad about speaking it. But in another way, I do think, like, like if you've got like a brother or sister and you can like gun them, right? But then if someone else does, you're like, what the fuck are you talking? I feel like a little bit like that. Like there's a way that you can do it that has like a level of affection or at least knowledge about it. That isn't, it's not like when Ricky Gervais situates the office in Slough and then that's just funny because it's Slough. And in fact, that the office was then coupled with twinned with another office in Swindon, wasn't it? That was but yeah, I feel like it's not like, and also I think making yourself complicit also, it's like if you're from somewhere, it's not like you're above it. Do you know what I mean? But it's really difficult to know how to do. Like I probably don't do it very well. Like, I don't really get invited to read it Swindon poetry.
That's really interesting.
I'm sorry, I don't actually know the answer to that, but it's an actually incredible question and one that I've consistently got asked myself. Also about family as well, like not even just town, but family, same thing. Like my dad was, not a great dude, but like going in on him. I've done it for 2 books now. Do you know what I mean? And there's like, it feels a bit like, well, maybe he's just a guy that had a few problems the same as me, but I've been super harsh on that guy. Like, got a poem in there called Dad's Dick. I read it on radio. This is the most surreal thing that has happened in my poetry career. Is like, I went on to Radio 3 and the other guest was not Frank Skinner, the other one, Baddiel, David Baddiel. The guy that wrote Three Lions, the football song, right? Which I sang wholeheartedly as a 16, 13-year-old boy, whatever. And we are literally talking about the poem, my poem, Dad's Dick, and therefore implicitly my dad's genitalia. Like I'm sitting there on Radio 3, like I think they've got like 80,000 listeners or something like that. So in front of 80,000 listeners, I'm talking about my dad's penis with the guy that wrote Three Lions. That's, yeah, I'd say. Yeah, I think that if anyone's going to
Right,
do
if
it.
anyone's going to do it, that's it. Brilliant, thank you so much. Yeah, the questions, hi at the back.
Hi, this might be kind of a strange question and not entirely related to poetry, but it's been a strange point of debate in classes. And which is the question is like in lockdown, did you find yourself writing more or less?
More. But the reason is, as I said, I got broken up with in lockdown, and like so my immediate thing I thought I'm going to do. So what I did was I got like an online therapist. I have OCD as well, so like, I had this like complex mental health issue anyway, plus lockdown, plus the like newly single thing, and I was like this online therapist. After a while, she said to me, I need you to write ruminations. Like you need to ruminate. So I did, I wrote 65 of them in 4 days. Like, and then I erased most of it. And then that's where this came from. So like, yeah, I wrote loads in the first lockdown. But then the second one didn't really count as a lot. We were still doing stuff in the second one, weren't we? Like, yeah, the first one was difficult. Like, it's only the only good thing was that rule about going out for a walk. You're allowed to walk a day. But I realised that if you don't go back inside, you can stay out all day. It practices the same walk, doesn't it? So me and my daughter like would go and climb trees and walk for 3 or 4 hours or whatever, and then. Yeah, after she went to bed, I would just smash out these rumination things.
Wow. That's really interesting. Thank you. Great question. Yeah, other questions. Yes, at the back.
This is your personal, please don't feel as though you have to respond to it. Do you find it's cathartic to write about, as you said, your mental illnesses and your breakup and your father? Do you find that there's a catharsis that comes with that, and that's why you have the ability to just kind of smash it all out, or do you find it's really difficult to get those ideas down on the page?
I think that. So I'll just give one example, and that's like when my dad died. So like, you imagine like when loads of my mates, like, you know, there was no fishing. There's no like good memory. The dude's just dead. So the whole time, like he's dead, and I'm like, yeah, like there's this line in like I think like a Franco horror poem where it's like he's dead, the old bastard's dead, or something like that. John Ashton poem. And I was like, yeah, kind of like that. But then also there's this inherent connection that it's just weird. Like, anyway, the whole thing is when your dad dies, everything's about your mum for like ages. And then you do the funeral thing, and then after the funeral thing is the awkward thing, and then you go home. And that was the first time I hadn't really had any chance to really process anything, and I didn't know what I thought. And then I wrote like maybe 6 things. And I think that like it's not necessarily cathartic, but like I was saying before, like there isn't really a vocabulary for those kind of complex emotional experiences unless you kind of create them. So like most of what I was doing was trying to create a vehicle through which I could understand what I felt or thought. And like I was saying to Rebecca about the masculinity thing, I didn't think one thing. So I couldn't solve it all in one poem. Like I had to write 6 of them, you know, and then I had to write basically an entire book of them. Like, so yeah, I think it's an ongoing thing. It's not necessarily a nice thing to write about, but it kind of has to. And it's like, I think like it's probably also dishonest to say like smashing them out, because I think that you've been writing them in your head for a long time. So when you actually write it down, it takes 20 minutes and everyone's like, oh my God, this dude's a genius. But actually, in reality, I've probably been thinking about that for like two months or something. Do you know what I mean? Kind of like that. And you just find that there's a dude called Tom Gunn that wrote this thing where he was like, he tried to write about like innocence and like sense of belonging, family, whatever, and he couldn't. He kept writing really bad poems. And then one day he went for a walk and he stumbled on a nudist beach. Right, Tom. Stumbled on a nudist beach. Yeah, there's probably no sign saying nudist beach. And anyway, it ends up on there. And there's this naked family. And it was like lovely, and the kid was like, oh, how's it going? And they just seemed so wholesome. And he went back and wrote about that. And then he realized actually he was writing about the thing that he wanted to write about. And sometimes I think that you just have to wait for the thing to pin your emotions to, and then it all kind of comes out. So that's kind of maybe, I don't know, that's maybe half an answer or something.
That's really interesting. That really resonates with me actually. Just waiting for the thing that you can stick it to.
Yeah.
Because it's just, yeah, you don't know where it's going to go. Any final questions? Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you all so much for being here. And if I could ask you to just join me in applause to thank Wayne. Very much, everyone, and yeah, we'll hope that you'll come to our event next term, which hopefully is going to be with poet Rachel Long. So hopefully you join us then. Yeah.
Rachel Long.
Rachel Long.